Because of the way the universe is created, we each of us live in two worlds at the same time. We have to live in the outer life of our own bodies and the inner life of our own souls.
Hello and welcome to Living the Inner Life. I'm your host, Chris Sheridan, and I want you to join with me on a journey into our inner lives, our thoughts, feelings, experiences, everything that we have that shapes the way we encounter and engage the outside world. And if we can utilize these tools of consciousness, we can help live a better life inside and out. Now, it's been said that life is a journey. It is a journey, not the destination. Okay? Well, it's also an inner journey, because no matter where you go in the outside world, you're taking your inner life with you. It's actually your inner life that is experiencing this outer journey. Now, in mythology and in movies, we have what's known as the hero's journey. Okay, Hollywood uses this as acts 1, 2, and 3, but the hero's journey is a departure, initiation, and a return. This 3-stage process of storytelling. It's present in all the great myths and in most of the really good movies. Even a lot of the average movies follow this 3-act, this 3-stage journey of the hero. Okay? And no matter how far, say in a movie like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker has to go. He has to leave his planet. He goes to another place. He's on a spaceship and a destroyer and some other planet. And there's all this traveling. It is quite the epic journey. But it's really a tale of how one person becomes another person. Okay, the boy becomes a man. It's almost like a rite of passage. Luke has to learn the ways of the Force. He has to leave his entire old way behind and encounter new things, new ways of acting, new things to see and experience, and most importantly, new ways for him to be in his own body, to use his own tools, all right? His tools of consciousness, his inner life, using the Force, using these weapons, flying a spaceship and doing all the things he has to do in order to achieve the outer goal, okay? But the outer goal is really there to serve the inner need, okay? He needed to become somebody. He needed to fulfill his destiny. He needed to become the person he was always meant to be. And to do that, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, you have to lose your old self, inside and outside. Okay, so that's what I really want to talk about this time, is the inner hero's journey. Okay, and we can get to that in so many movies, a lot of mythic tales going, well, pretty much all the way back to Homer and his Odyssey. That's where this hero's journey, this journey of 1,000 faces that Joseph Campbell talked about and wrote about so much in the 20th century, and was really the mythic basis that George Lucas drew from to make his Star Wars epic. And it's also in so many other movies. Okay? So this hero's journey begins with somebody in their home world. And that's why this first stage is called the departure. Okay? You have to be somewhere before you can depart. Okay, so usually we spend some time in a movie, let's say, maybe the first 20 minutes or so, with the person, the hero to be. Sometimes it's an unwitting hero, it's a reluctant hero. Sometimes it's a very mundane role in society, or seemingly so. It could be a janitor. It doesn't have to be an epic spaceship pilot to go off and defeat evil. Okay, it can happen right in your backyard, right in your hometown, right in your home. All right. So, but the departure, again, has to be from what you're familiar with what you've known, everything that's got to you to get to this point up until now has to be in some ways left behind. All right. So before the hero embarks on this journey, before this departure, during this departure phase, there's a call to action, a call to adventure. All right. And this in Star Wars was when the princess was shown in the holographic image saying we need some help. He finds Obi-Wan Kenobi and he says, you have to come with me and we have to go fulfill this mission. And he's like, no, I can't do that. I've got chores. And I always thought that was weird. Like if I always imagine myself as being Luke Skywalker, I would have jumped at the opportunity, or at least thought I would. But that goes to show that no matter how enticing this call to adventure is, okay, it could be something that the hero actually wants to do, or it could be circumstances that they get thrown into a situation that forces them to depart. Either way, the departure isn't easy because it's familiar. It's your familiar world. So things got to the point where he could no longer stay on his home planet, and he agreed to go and start off on this epic adventure. All right. And at this point, when you begin, I guess, the next phase, which is initiation, you are going through this threshold. In Hollywood, they call it the Act 1 turning point. That's where you go from departure to initiation, from Act 1 to Act 2. That's when the call to adventure gets answered and you're really set on your way. And it's a new world. There are new people or creatures to encounter. There are new places. There are new ways of looking at the world. A lot of self-discovery that happens. Usually there's a mentor at this point that comes in to help the hero grow and develop. Of course, like lifting weights or learning an instrument, the mentor can't do that for the hero, but you can really help facilitate that. Or like a judo instructor, give them the incentive, show them some of the moves, and then you just have to let the person develop on their own with this guidance from the mentor. And what happens about partway through, maybe 2/3 of the way through this middle section, this initiation, the mentor has to disappear. A lot of times the mentor dies. Obi-Wan Kenobi died in Star Wars. A lot of times it's either a sickness or something that the mentor either has to leave by departure, a different departure, or through the grand departure. Either way, this is a very significant point because this is when the hero can't rely on the mentor, the wise person, the instructor anymore. And as like a mother bird kicking the young birds out of the nest, and hopefully they'll learn how to fly before they hit the ground, you have to do that. There is some point where you have to turn them out. The hero needs, otherwise they can't do it. If they're not really much of a hero, if they can't stand on their own 2 feet, if they can't find that inner strength, okay? Because all this stuff is coming from the outside, and at some point it has to come in from the inside. And it's almost as if there are two stories going on. There's this outer goal, the world around them, the things to do, the quest. You have to find the Grail, rescue the princess, whatever it is you're going to do. And at the same time, parallel to that, just under the surface, is this inner need. There might be a ghost, something from the past that needs to be reconciled, a shadow or some sort of burden from previous times, or it's something they've never been able, as of yet, to accomplish personally, some growth. They need to outgrow who they were, both outside and inside. And this is where the two stories really run together. This is where, and if you really look at some movies, you will see that there is always this outer and inner story. Now, a lot of times the more epic the outer adventure is with, things and battles and ships and creatures and journeys and all these things going on, generally speaking, there's probably less of an inner story because it's so focused externally, but it's still there. In all good movies, it is still there. And they are related. They seem like they're just kind of running parallel, but at some point, and this would be in this initiation phase, towards the end, before the third section, which is the return, that the hero has to then become this person that he's been in training, in essence, during this initiation phase. And then there's a call to return, okay? There's to come back either to the village or the home or wherever you've been away from, or just come back into the fold. It might be a new home, it might be a new tribe, but you have to bring everything that you've learned and bring that together so that you can accomplish something and you can become this person that you've always needed to be, okay? And early on in any movie or epic story, we'll see that the character, this hero, exhibits some of those qualities of who they are meant to become. They can't just go from one way to completely the other way. There has to be clues. Even Luke Skywalker, who was in essence a farm boy, but he was really good around machines and all the droids, all the robots, and he had some level of a spaceship fighter thing that he was piloting and had a reputation for being good, kind of like maybe the kid that has a car and is kind of good at racing on the back roads and then gets picked up by a race team or something. So he had exhibited these qualities. Okay. Plus, when it's your destiny, you kind of have it in you anyway. Most of the times, though, the hero doesn't recognize that they have that, or to that degree that they're going to need. So at this point, late in this middle section, this initiation would be Act 2, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the movie, the outer goal reaches a crisis. And sometimes this is called the ordeal or an appointment with death. Sometimes it actually is the death of the mentor. It could be other things, other crises that go on. And it throws everything into the works. There's this moment of feeling defeated and can't go on. And this is where the inner story comes alive. Because for the hero to accomplish the outer goal, the inner need has to be addressed. In fact, the outer goal can't be satisfied, can't be accomplished without this inner change. Okay? So then they sort of become one, and this is like an integration that the hero then becomes something more than they ever thought they were, more because they need to be more to become the person to do what is in their destiny to do. Okay? So with Star Wars, I guess this is after the Death Star scene. I hope you've seen the movie, so I'm making these references. It doesn't matter if you haven't. There's a return. He goes back to the new rebel base, and they have to regroup and try another attack and really finish what was at the beginning, have these plans to this Death Star. Now they were able to look at them and find a weakness and try to exploit it, and able to destroy the Death Star. Spoiler alert, they do. Happy ending. But all the while, Luke Skywalker through Obi-Wan, and even after Obi-Wan dies or disappears, you can still hear his voice, which is kind of interesting. Even teachers from long ago, friends that have long passed, sometimes I can still hear their voice saying, "No, don't be a jerk, be cool, dude." Or saying, "Hey, don't be a weakling. You're strong. Get out there and be your warrior self and attack at full force. Don't you forget who you are, So you can hear these voices because they are the voice of reason. And at some point they were this outer voice from this mentor, from this wise person, this guide, this teacher. And at some point it becomes internalized and you can hear it within. So all the while, and this is where it's really illustrated, I think, the best in the original Star Wars movie, Luke Skywalker, very early on with his encounter with Obi-Wan, is introduced to, as are we, the audience, and explained the ways and was given some exercises in how he can develop his skills with using the Force, this mystical force that surrounds and penetrates and binds everything in the galaxy together. He didn't really know much about it at the beginning, but he had to learn the ways. And by doing that, and through doing that, every time Obi-Wan would somehow restrict his senses, there was a early scene where he's fighting with a little drone kind of a thing, or, doing some exercises with his lightsaber. And he puts a helmet on him. Obi-Wan says, yeah, put this helmet on. And it has the face shield down. And he's like, well, I can't see. How can I do this? It's sort of the blindfolded pinata kind of thing. And then he's saying, well, your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. You have to stretch out. You have to use another part of yourself, another part of your consciousness, another part of your inner life. Okay? And this goes on and it continues to where at the very end, sort of in the final sequence, when Luke is in the X-Wing fighter and he's in the trench on his way to knock out the Death Star, he hears Obi-Wan's voice again, and trust your feelings, reach out. And he's all focused in on this scope and this targeting mechanism and all the electronic gear. And then he turns it off. And, he gets a call from base, like, your targeting computer is off. What's wrong? I've got this, and that was a very significant, very dramatic showing, because you have to show things in movies. You can't just tell about them. You have to really show it. So it was very visual that he took off this machine, this technical wizardry that was, supposed to help him do what he needed to do. But the Force was somehow better, and he had developed it at that point. I know I kind of had a crash course in the Force, because he had to. But at that point, he had developed enough to where he was then trusting more in the Force than he was in some of the visual and mechanical assistants and aids that were around him. Okay? So that's this inner and this outer. He was able to accomplish the outer goal of destroying the Death Star only by releasing and satisfying that inner need, that inner growth, that inner story had to come together. Okay? And it was more important. It wouldn't have been accomplished on the outside if it hadn't have been accomplished and developed and released from within. Okay? So that's the hero's journey. And in movies, it becomes very easy to see. You can go back and analyze Casablanca or Pretty Woman or really any movie. It's a romantic comedy. Just the villain sometimes is the lover in a romantic comedy, the villain-ish, because there's, it's competition, and boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy wins girl over at the end. Those are the three stages, these three acts in a movie, but we have these in our life. Okay, there's the Oedipus riddle of the Sphinx, that what creature in the morning walks on 4 legs, and in the afternoon walks on 2, and in the evening walks on 3. Okay, again, here's this 1, 2, 3, this 3-act structure. And the answer, of course, is a human, because in the morning, that's in your life, the early stage of your life, the dawn of your development, you crawl on, you can't walk yet, you crawl on all 4s. And then as you go into childhood and adulthood, you walk on 2 legs. That's this middle part. In the afternoon, during the day, and in the evening, as the sun is setting, as you're looking at more towards the end chapter, you maybe use a cane or something. So that's the 3rd leg. Okay, it's an old story, but it's true. It's a true metaphor. Okay, and it was just using the day as an allegory or a symbol of somebody's entire life. So the hero's journey, if we want to look at that in our lives for our entire life, this departure, initiation, and return, well, the first major chapter is growth and physical development, education, going through school, physical maturity. You have to shave, you have to do all kinds of things, learn how to drive, you leave the house. And that's the world okay? Living at home, most of us, going to school, K through 12. A lot of times we live in the same place. If not, we move around, but you're still going to be in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. You're going to go through this series of educational chapters. But that's what you do. By the time you're 18 and you're out of high school, that's all you've known, really. I mean, maybe did other things in the summer or whatnot, but that's been your life. And if from there You go off to military service, maybe off to college, which again is kind of more school, or you go off into the workforce. Well, that's a departure from what you've known. That's your Act 1 turning point. And then you have a whole nother set of challenges. You're living on your own. Then you have to do all these things your parents did for you before. And then even further into that, you maybe have kids of your own, and then you become your parents, in that sense, and live out a career and then have an empty nest. And again, this is kind of a traditional model, but I'm just using it as an example. And then at some point towards retirement, you're going to be in this third chapter, this return. And this is where a lot of people get lost, I think. We can define ourselves through our children, through our work, especially if we own a business or we have a position of prominence at our work for a long career, for 30 years or more. Okay, and then you retire, and then what? You mow the lawn, you golf a couple times, and you're bored, all right? Unless you've really set up this third chapter, this what would be in the hero's journey, the return. Okay, and I think people need to probably prepare for that. My grandfather died on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. within a year after his retirement. He didn't know what to do. He had been an architect his whole career. And even in high school, it was something it was a hobby that he went and studied for. And he did it for decades and decades and was prominent in Pittsburgh and he wasn't himself. Who was he, after that? And he just died. So, this was a long time ago, but he just sort of up and died like Monday again. And this happens a lot. You've probably heard this, this tale. So we have to set ourselves up for this return. And in mythology and in our lives, this return is when you give back. This is when this journey has to make meaning. You have to make sense of it. You have to cultivate and collaborate and condense everything that you've learned up until this point and somehow give it back. There's a lot of retired executives who mentor entrepreneurs or people coming up in the business world. It's a great time to teach, maybe in community college or something like that, where you can share your experience with people who can benefit from it. All right. A lot of volunteer work would be great in retirement years or leading up to that. Then you have something to do. You have something to give back. And in mythology, it's when the hero, after going on this quest, if it's to rescue the princess, it's to bring her home. If it's to retrieve the grail, it's to bring it back to the village so they can benefit from it. Whatever's missing, whatever needs to come back. And really what needs to come back is the hero, this new hero. Because through this hero's journey, inward and outward, you're a different person. When you return, when you come back, you're not the same person at the beginning of the movie that you are at the end. And it doesn't have to be your whole entire life, this hero's journey. It could be a day, like in the Oedipus riddle, or it can be going on several different times in different phases throughout your life. Okay, so like when I broke my back in a plane crash, that was certainly a departure of the 27 years I had lived up until then as being able-bodied and, spinal cord injury, and had been in a wheelchair for the last 30 years ever since. And so that was sort of an initiation. I was kind of thrown into it, this new world of disability, and, how to, get by with hand controls on the car, and, you figure it out. And there's people that have done it before, mentors that have gone through this journey and were giving it back to me, and I've been able to peer counsel people also that are freshly injured. Worked with some American veterans who had been off in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. This was years ago, and came back disabled. And, of course, I'm a veteran, not of war or military, but I was many decades experienced being disabled. So I was able to share that. But so when you come back, you have not only the gift, if it's the gold or the princess that you've gone on this epic journey to return, it's really you, okay? The hero is what comes back is what returns. The hero that is needed for this time, the hero that he or she needed to become, okay, that had the propensity, had the potential, had the destiny, had the call on their life to become this, but had to go through this epic outer journey to make the inner journey, the inner change. So think of that as you go through your life in the outer world. You are also changing within. You are making a journey within. And if you're having trouble with the outer world accomplishing goals, then it's probably because the inner need has not been met. So look towards that. I think we'll continue on this at a later date, but this is really just an introduction into the hero's journey and how it originated in mythology and it plays out in some of the better movies. And it plays out in our life. That's why it works in movies, because it works in our lives. We are all on this life journey together in a sense and very alone individually in another sense. We all have to take it. Each one of us takes our own journey in the outer world and the inner journey. And thank you for your journey taking you here to spend some time with me on this podcast here on Living the Inner Life.